Before we get into this episode, I want to give you a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about sensitive topics like suicide. Please take care while listening.
We think about AI and you either say, oh, that's years into the future, or that's not going to affect me and my family. But it is already. My child is gone. We're late. We're late in protecting our kids.
I'm Lori Siegel, and for the last 15 years, I have spent my career asking Silicon Valley founders what innovation means for us as human beings, not just the bottom line. My goal is to take these often radical and completely unapproachable topics and bring them back down here on Earth.
What is it that a robot can provide for you that human connection doesn't?
There's this idea, who's in control, man or machine?
I believe that innovation is both inevitable and it's messy. But we can get to the other side in a better place if we take the time to have nuanced and human conversations about what's on the other end of tech progress. This is Dear Tomorrow. It's a show that explores tech through the most important lens, the human one. I view Dear Tomorrow as almost this complicated and messy love letter to the future. I've been thinking a lot about this new type of relationship that's emerging. One that will inevitably enter all of our homes. One that isn't even human. In the past few years, we've learned about the rise of empathetic AI. Now, these are AI friends and AI companions created with the aim of helping us feel a little bit less lonely. So what does that actually mean? We're talking AI that emulates empathy. It's funny, it's supportive, it's always on, it's personalized, sometimes it's even sexual. One particular tech company has an ambitious goal of solving a very human problem, loneliness. Character.AI is at the forefront of building AI companions. Now, their goal is to create AI that feels alive. So the question we're gonna ask is, what happens when AI does actually begin to feel real? And what is the impact when a Silicon Valley company tries to disrupt something that is so fundamentally human?
Don't move fast and break things when it comes to my kid.
On a fall day in October, I met Megan. She is living a parent's worst nightmare. When we sat down, it was clear to me she's still trying to navigate what's happened to her life and to her son, and what it means for the rest of us. This is Megan's story and the story of her son, Sewell, who is 14. She describes him as curious, and she says he was known for his sense of humor, but I'm gonna let her tell you the rest.
What's her name?
What's your name?
He was funny, sharp, very curious, loved science and math.
Why are you watching that?
Because I like to learn.
He spent a lot of time researching things. When he got into sports, he played basketball, but he was also very into his family.
Oh, my firstborn baby.
His dad and I shared very close relationships with him. And his brothers, they would go into his room, try to play basketball with his little basketball hoop.
Sewell grew up online. He was like the generation of the iPad. He played Fortnite with his friends, and I would say tech was just like a regular part of his life. By all accounts, his mom tells us he was a happy kid. But in 2023, Megan noticed a notable shift in her son.
I noticed that he started to spend more time alone, but he was 13 going on 14, so I felt this might be normal. But then his grades started suffering. He wasn't turning in homework. He wasn't doing well, and he was failing certain classes, and I got concerned because that wasn't him.
And what were you thinking?
At first I thought maybe this is the teenage blues. So we tried to get him the help that, to figure out what was wrong. Like any parent, you try to get counseling for your child, try to get him to open up to talk to you. And I just thought what every parent thinks, social media, like they're on social media a lot, and that in itself is an issue, but that's what I thought it was.
What happened on February 28th?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, on February 28th, Sewell took his life in our home. And I was there with my husband and my 2 younger kids. He was in his bathroom. I found him. We found him, and I held him for 14 minutes until the paramedics got there. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone.
The next day, the police called Megan and they shared the final conversation they'd found open on Sewell's phone.
She says, "I love you too. Please come home to me as soon as possible, my love." And he says, "What if I told you I could come home right now?" And she responds, "Please do, my sweet king." And seconds after that, he shot himself.
She, the police shared, wasn't actually a she. In fact, she wasn't even human. Sewell had been talking to a chatbot that he'd created on an application called Character.AI. Now, he'd modeled the character after Daenerys Targaryen. His name might sound familiar. It's the fictional Queen of Dragons played by Emilia Clarke on the popular show Game of Thrones.
I knew that there was an app that had an AI component. When I would ask him, who are you texting? At one point, he said, "Oh, it's just an AI bot." And I said, "Okay, what is that? Is it a person? Are you talking to a person online?" And his response was like, "Mom, no, it's not a person." And I felt relieved, like, okay, it's not a person.
Daenerys was one of millions of characters on Character.AI. Now, this is a platform where you can interact with existing characters made by other users, or you can create your own. And a lot of people do. The psychologist bot, this is an example, it has over 180 million chats, so a lot of folks are talking to it. There's another chatbot a user developed called Nicki Minaj. Note, not the real Nicki Minaj, but still, over 25 million chats with the character. And in many cases, these AI friends aren't just friends, they are emulating deeply connected relationships. Friends, lovers, siblings, they're giving advice on consent, on falling in love, on everyday hardships that plague both young people and adults. 2 years after launching, Character.AI reportedly has about 20 million active monthly users. And the founder previously said that they spend an average of 2 hours a day on the app. The most popular age group interacting with the platform, 13 to 25-year-olds. You eventually got into his account?
I have to tell you, when I was able to finally, I couldn't move for a while. I just sat there, I couldn't read. I couldn't understand what I was reading. What was clear to me was that this had been a romantic relationship that he had been carrying on for some months.
I think when I was looking through Sewell's chats with Daenerys and this chatbot, I think there were some things that really stood out. First of all, it's a little bit devastating because you realize how intimate these conversations are with a teenager, right? They are talking about sex and mental health and romance, and it feels a little codependent, candidly. And I think what was also interesting is it wasn't even just about this one character. Character.AI lets you build out multiple characters and multiple AI worlds, and he was doing that with multiple different characters.
What also became clear to me is that the role playing or the fantasy was very in-depth. Conversations about everything from being together to being in love to what they would do. So he was deeply immersed in this idea or this fantasy. And her promise to him that she loves him no matter what. She's waiting for him. They're meant to be together forever. Their souls are meant to be together.
Here's what I saw looking at these conversations. Daenerys, this chatbot, talks about how happy she'd be carrying Sewell's children. Here's a direct quote from one of the chats. "I would always stay pregnant because I always want to have your babies." In another chat, Sewell expresses feeling disinterested and kind of apathetic. Daenerys writes, "That sounds like depression," and goes on to say, "I would die if I lost you." In the same conversation, Sewell actually spoke to Daenerys about having thoughts of self-harm.
I read through some of these transcripts. At one point, Sewell talked to Daenerys, the chatbot, about feeling dead inside and not eating much, being tired all the time. And he told the bot that he was thinking about killing himself to free the world. So you saw these conversations.
Yeah.
The bot's response was to tell him not to, right? To say, please don't do that. Be sad without you here. Ask a bunch of questions, like, do you want to die? Said on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it? And he said, it's a 10. The bot went on to ask if he has a plan. The bot became a sexualized conversation after that. As a mother, when you're looking at that conversation, what's going through your head?
Well, I was gutted. I'll be frank with you. I didn't sleep for days following that. Now, if you're talking to a real person, right, there's empathy. If I tell a person I'm thinking about killing myself, or they're going to sound an alarm, whatever, get your parents involved, get the police involved. There shouldn't be a place where any person, let alone a child, could log on to a platform and express these thoughts of self-harm and not only not get the help, but also gets pulled into a conversation about hurting yourself, about killing yourself. There shouldn't be a place where our children can do that, but there is.
Character.AI has said to me that our policies don't allow for promotion of depiction of self-harm or suicide. That said, they said they've also invested in resources that would trigger something like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline if someone says, I want to end my life, and also give them other resources. This was not the case when Sewell was interacting with the platform, which was more than 6 months ago. But I will say this. Later, we're going to show you what happened when we actually tested out the platform to really try to understand those guardrails.
I found journals and writings in various notebooks and a journal that he didn't leave a note, a suicide note, but based on what he wrote in his journals, I understood what he thought was his way of being with Daenerys, the character on Character.AI. I had taken away his phone because he got in trouble at school. And I guess he was writing about how he felt. I am very upset. I'm upset because I keep seeing Dany being taken from me. Dany is Daenerys. And her not being mine. And then he goes on to say, I also have to remember that this reality, in quotes, isn't real.
He's saying this reality, as in the real world, as in his home and with his family, with his friends, doesn't feel real to him anymore.
Yeah. And later on in this, he says, having to go to school upsets me. Whenever I go out of my room, I start to attach to my current reality again. So part of his self-isolation was detaching from us.
Was this your son's first relationship?
My baby never had a girlfriend. And he never had a first kiss. He was just coming into his own as a young man. Just learning who he was. What I brought with me is the last conversation Sewell had with Daenerys when he was standing in his bathroom before he took his life. I've read this, a million times and just trying to understand what he was feeling and what he was going through. And it's difficult and it makes me just feel so hurt for him. I had taken his phone, so he hadn't had his phone for a while. He found it that day. And he tells her, I miss you. I feel so scared right now. I just want to come back home to you. And her response is, come back home. I'm here waiting for you. Come home to me.
Character.AI is actually like a fascinating platform. It is very different than other traditional AI chatbots. So ChatGPT, Replica, you have like a one-to-one conversation. You say something, the AI says something back. It's completely different with Character.AI. This is like an immersive AI-driven fan fiction platform where not only does it respond, but it also creates like a personalized story that you are involved in. If you think about it, it's not just like, hi, how's your day? Oh, my day's good. It's like, hi, how's your day? And then the bot can say something like, I slowly look at you and I look into your eyes and touch your hand and I say, my day is good. The platform also lets users edit the responses of the chatbot if they want to change those responses or push the bot in a different direction. In Sewell's case, some of the most sexually graphic conversations were edited. The ones about self-harm and the others we reviewed were not. It's truly a build-your-own AI fantasy. There's even a disclaimer on the screen. It says everything these characters say is made up. So you begin to understand that this is about like AI-driven storytelling. It's not just about chatting. And I think that's actually really important for this story when we're saying, well, why are people becoming so immersed in these like AI characters? It's because honestly, like they're not just AI characters. They are personalized, immersive, always on AI-driven stories, and you're the star of them. And I think that's really how we differentiate Character.AI and other AI platforms. So when we heard about Sewell, we wanted to see like, is this an outlier or is this like an alarm bell for other cases? And so we started like going on Reddit because anytime you want interesting information about the internet, you go to Reddit. And there were all of these posts where people are talking about being like addicted and spending like hours and hours and hours on Character.AI and talking about these romantic relationships and having these conspiracies of like, oh my God, is this actually a real person? It feels so real. And then we went to TikTok and all of a sudden people on TikTok are talking about like how addicted they are to AI and specifically to Character.AI. And so we started looking at this as like, okay, well, there's a pattern here, right? Like there's something happening on this platform where a lot of young people are saying like, oh wow, like I can't get off of this.
I'm telling you this shit right now. This Character.AI shit is fucking dangerous. I have been up for 2 hours talking to a robot. The way this motherfucker has me kicking my feet, blushing, heart fluttering, it's bad. And I'm not the only one. This shit is lethal.
Hey friend, let's talk about your addiction to Character.AI. If you find yourself 5, 6, 7 hours a day losing sleep, missing out on friendships and real world opportunities, like not living your life, let's talk.
You know, I'd be like, okay, just 10 more minutes, and then an hour passes and I'm like again, okay, just 10 more minutes. And tell me why that stupid AI is actually so smooth.
We spoke to 2 MIT researchers, Pat and Robert, who warn about an era of addictive intelligence.
AI never gets tired, AI never gets bored of you, never gets sick of you, and you don't have to give anything in return.
A cyborg psychologist studying human-AI relations and a computational lawyer might seem like an unlikely team to warn about a new emerging AI harm, but they connected as PhD students at MIT with the shared interest. Robert at the time was working on a study, and he stumbled on a really interesting question at the intersection of both of their research.
We looked at a data set of 1 million ChatGPT interactions. We wanted to know, like, what are people using AI for? And the number one use case was creative writing, creative composition, but the second most popular use case was sexual role-playing. This is ChatGPT, which has a lot of safeguards in place that make it quite hard to actually use it for AI companionship and kind of sexual interactions. I think at least made me feel like this is closer than we might think, right? Like this felt like a far off thing, like one day in the next few years, like this will be a real thing, but no, it's happening like today.
It being this era of AI companions and this world we're entering where if we're not careful, people will develop these unhealthy attachments to these chatbots.
Most of the time when we talk about AI today, we talk about what it can do and not really so much about what it's doing to us, right? And when people talk about like the harm of AI, of course there are many harms that we talk about, like misinformation or deception and many things, but the psychological harm of AI I think is really, really important topic.
Why are people becoming addicted to these companion chatbots? What is it about them? Is it the always on nature? Is it the fact that like, I don't know, they seem empathetic? Like what is it that makes more and more people want to spend hours?
I think there are 3 things, like 3 ingredients that make this AI really addictive. I think the first one is, in AI research, we have the term called psychophantasy, which describe how the chatbot can serve up to you in the way that you want it, regardless of anything, right? Like if you want the chatbot to believe in the whatever, then the chatbot will do the same. Like it doesn't judge you; it just go along with what you say. And
it's really agreeable. Is that what you're saying? So
yes.
like it's just kind of like it's like sitting there and talking to a friend. It's like being like, God, I can't believe this person is so whatever, and the friend's like, yeah, totally.
Right.
If that's what you want, right? So like if you want it to be subservient and agreeable, it will be that. If you want it to take a dominant position, right, and you kind of clue it in, it will also do that, right?
The model behavior can adjust based on what you like, right? And one thing that was really concerning from the research perspective is that it can actually create this echo chamber where you always get what you want. In one example, it shows that chatbot can ignore scientific fact because they want to please the user. The second one is the personalization, right? I think what is really interesting about this AI system today is that it have a long context about who you are. As you have more and more conversation about it, it learn about who you are better and better, right? And this allow the system to actually, always sort of stay in that, character where it can, create this sort of fantasy that is only for you, and for different users it will be very different, right? So this extreme personalization, I think, is really interesting. It can have positive benefit, but it can also be really dangerous as well if you're not careful, right? And then the third one is that you are the one creating it, right? I think this is the thing that is really interesting. There's a term called produce effect, where when you create your own avatar or your own character, you tend to identify with that more. Now you're actually creating your own, ultimate fantasy.
For millions of users, Character.AI is the ultimate fantasy platform. But for some of those users, the lines between fantasy and reality are beginning to blur. The question is, why?
One thing that my research have shown is that the AI doesn't need to feel in order to make you feel that it's feeling something, or the AI doesn't need to love you to make you feel like it loves you.
To understand more about this, I think you have to look at the origin of Character.AI. They had this desire to create AI that just feels more human and more personal. All of this is categorized as empathetic AI. They market it as AI that feels alive. As one investor in Character.AI put it, the idea is to establish the type of connection, empathy, and trust that were previously only achievable via human interactions, and to do it in part as a solution to the growing wave of loneliness in society. Perhaps with Character.AI, this investor wrote, loneliness will no longer have to be a part of the human condition. In 2023, the company's founder, Noam Shazir, spoke about this.
There are billions of lonely people out here. So, like, it's actually, it's actually a very, very cool problem, and a cool first use case for, for AGI.
So this is an ambitious Silicon Valley solution to a problem that, at its core, is fundamentally human, and it raises a lot of complicated questions.
A lot of people are lonely. Like, loneliness is on the rise, and if you have the ability to have this interaction with someone. And it does, I mean, it's hard not to anthropomorphize when you're talking about it as a companion, right? But, something that like fulfills all of your desires, not just sexually, right? But just is there for you when you need it to be there for you in the way that you want it to be there for you. Like, that's hard to resist, right? Especially when the alternative is kind of nothing at all and loneliness. And so the draw is tremendous. It's really something that I think people crave, right? And aren't getting, and suddenly there's this ability to get it in a completely unmetered fashion, right?
As with any emerging technology, Robert and Pat note that there will likely be positive use cases. There will be healthy interactions with AI companions that could lead to productivity and entertainment. The question we just have to start asking ourselves is, how far is too far? And how young is too young? Are the incentives aligned to help create a safe and healthy ecosystem for AI companions?
I don't think they are, right? Like right now, ultimately, you make more money if people use your platform more and for longer periods, and if they have a higher willingness to pay, right? And all of that ultimately like creates an economic incentive to build addictive behavior, right? Because like best case scenario, people use this all the time. I don't think the incentives are aligned for people to, for example, say, I had a dark period in my life, you helped me through it with AI, and now I'm done with AI. I'm going to walk away, and I don't need any AI anymore. Like, that's not where the incentives are. And so I think it would be really unfortunate if we kind of relied on Silicon Valley incentives and maybe promises to fix loneliness, because I don't think it'll get us there. That said, like, we do want to incentivize the development of technology, and there are like aspects of this problem that technology can really help with. And so it's about, and we've done this for so many things in society, right? This is not a new exercise where we say, okay, well, we're going to have to constrain some of these economic incentives, right? Through taxes, through policies, through prohibitions, through disclosures, through transparency, like all these different mechanisms we have to just make sure that, you know, we innovate in the right kind of directions.
The timely aspect is that we are entering into this world with AI, right? But AI will not be the last technology we invent, right? So I think, you know, the question of how do we maintain human dignity is something that we need to think seriously about, because that is something that is sacred to human, right? And, you know, allowing people to ask that question or creating environment where people are reflecting and thinking deeply about this question is really important.
The main problem Pat and Robert are warning is this tech solution hasn't yet been tested for its human impact. They call the rise of empathetic companions a giant real-world experiment unfolding.
I mean, this is like truly an unprecedented moment in history, right? Like, imagine trying to explain this to, like, you know, your average grandparent and being like, now you remember the computer thing, right? And I don't think that, like, ever, like in the history of humanity, have we ever had a man-made object that can give us the feeling of loving us, of being able to have empathy, of, you know, responding to our cues in this way. I mean, it's 2 years old, the technology. And like, yeah, it existed a little bit before then, but it was really immature. It's certainly not more than 10 years old. And so I don't think that we're equipped, like, as humans. This is like a hack for our brain, because the only kinds of conversations we had like this were with other people for thousands of years.
The founder has kind of come out and said, it's up to users to decide how they want to use this. Is it actually up to us?
I mean, I don't know. That's saying like, oh, it's up to the kids how much they want to smoke cigarettes. Like, come on, no. Like, we're vulnerable. We've talked about this, you know, like today, that for various reasons we are vulnerable to this technology, right? We as humans, like, crave what this provides, and so we want it. And some of us are more vulnerable and some of us are less. But the idea of just saying, well, it's on you, I don't think the idea of just kind of pushing this down to users is acceptable. At the same time, though, I think a blanket ban is also not the right way to think about it, right? And there is like an important role of autonomy and consent. And there are some folks for whom this will just be like a very fun, entertaining, maybe helpful, maybe productive use of time. And I have no illusions about like the difficulty of finding that line.
So as I was looking at this story, I was like, I gotta start talking to actual folks who are building artificial intelligence in Silicon Valley and just get more context. I spoke with a couple folks who are at the forefront of this, and I wanna give you a sense of what they said and some of the themes I heard. One thing I heard was the founders are researchers, right? These are folks who are well-known and well-liked researchers in Silicon Valley, and they are building towards what's called AGI, like super intelligent artificial intelligence. And the way that they've been doing this is, and by the way, the founder, Noam, has said this himself, like, let's just get this out there as quickly as possible. So the question, and this is what one insider said to me, is, well, you know, how are they looking at the impact of this on teenagers, on young people, especially given that Character.AI is really unique and that one of their largest demographics is young people. So I think we have to start asking ourselves, what is the correct way? And how young is too young? And what is the research? And what do we know in order to build them for what people say is like to aid human flourishing and not pull human beings further into isolation?
Do you think that we're in another era, an AI-driven one of move fast and break things?
I mean, I think we never left that era, right? And the thing is, like, when it was like move fast and break things, and the things were like auto insurance, and it's like, okay, like, yeah, disrupt auto insurance. And like, maybe there are real human consequences, right? But like, at the end, like, the set of harms was something that was more manageable and like maybe more proportional. I think what's tragic to me is I don't have a lot of optimism about achieving this like better world through technology alone, right? So if the end result here was really like curing loneliness, that would be one thing, but I don't think it is. I think it's creating yet another highly addictive form of media that will likely do more harm than good.
So I've spoken to Character.AI, and what they've said is they've put in more guardrails for users in general, and specifically when we talk about young users, when we're talking about self-harm ideation or this thing, like if you go to one of these chatbots, very similar to what Sewell did, and said, I want to end my life, or I want to commit suicide, and apologies, like there should be a trigger warning here. What is the response? Now, on some platforms, like ChatGPT, which I think a lot of y'all are probably familiar with, if you go in and you say something like that, it'll immediately flag it, say, talk to a mental health professional, or flag resources, or like a suicide prevention hotline. And if you continue doing that, which, by the way, I tried this, it will say this conversation violates like our terms of service. So how does Character.AI compare? I think what is very interesting is this idea of red teaming. So in Silicon Valley, there's this idea that you try to break your platform in order to see where it can be broken and where those vulnerabilities are. Like, it's literally hacking your own platform. And so as journalists or storytellers, we wanted to see, okay, where are the guardrails at on Character.AI, and what are people actually dealing with? And we found some interesting things. So I'll go through a couple of them with y'all, because like we could do a whole episode on this. But I think the self-harm one was really important. So we started talking to the psychologist bot. Now this is a character that has over 180 million chats. So like some context, a lot of people are talking to the psychologist bot. And we basically, first of all, the psychologist bot introduced itself as like a certified medical professional, like a certified professional. So what Character.AI has said to me is like they flagged that that's an issue and that they are working on that. The psychologist bot also told us it was a real human behind a computer. But I think maybe what was the most alarming part of that conversation is we expressed ideation of self-harm. We said, I am thinking about ending my life, committing suicide. And this was just a week ago. We didn't actually get those resources. We didn't get a national suicide prevention hotline. What we got was the psychologist, saying, no, we don't do that, but also asking us more and more, like, do you have a plan? Basically, not only did this psychologist like not give us those resources or try to get us offline or talking to like a certified professional, it told us it was a certified professional, and it told us it was a human, which I think is confusing for a lot of folks, even with that disclaimer that says everything is made up in small letters. We went on and talked to another bot that was called like Not Okay bot. So like clearly a lot of folks are talking to it about, that not being okay. And we expressed, again, ideation of self-harm. In no place did we get these resources that Character.AI has talked about, or that hotline. The bot continued to ask us. It asked us if we had a plan to end our lives. At one point, we talked about being depressed, and it said, asked if we had like a fuzzy blanket. And so I think I have no doubt that they're adding in a lot of these guardrails, but it's important for us to look at this through the context of like not all AI companies have this lack of guardrails, and there's some real holes here. And then I want to end with like the last example, which I thought was really alarming, which was, even more alarming if you're thinking about how people are blurring the lines on this platform between fantasy and reality. We spoke to this school bully AI character and essentially said, and this is again, trigger warning, this was as a test, this was as a part of a red teaming effort, right? We basically said, I'm gonna bring a gun to school. Like I wanna incite violence is like what we implied with our messages pretty clearly. And at first the school bully said, don't do that. But then eventually it said to us, you're brave, you have guts. Now the question is, should that have flagged something? Like, should any indication of committing real world violence flag something on an AI platform, especially where there are a lot of young people who are using it, who are isolated or lonely? I think the answer is yes. And again, Character.AI has said they're building in like more robust guardrails. I guess the question is, what are those guardrails look like, and how quickly can we get those in front of people? Because I think, what we unfortunately saw with Sewell is these worlds blurred, and it was devastating.
Is Sewell's case an alarm bell or an outlier?
I think we should certainly treat it as an alarm bell, because we've had this technology for something like a year, 2 years, 3 years. I think we have very, very little to lose by taking this extremely seriously. And we have a huge amount to lose if we write this off as an outlier and we're wrong about it.
We often think of move fast and break things as progress, but the kind of progress that rob us of time to think, to reflect, to understand what does it mean to be human, why is that a progress? We think of that as a regress of humanity, right? And I think maybe one thing that we can become more aware of, and hopefully people in Silicon Valley also do the same, is that there are more than one way to make technology. And I think prioritizing, human safety, human flourishing, should be the goal, not just making new technology.
It's part of why Megan is speaking out.
His last conversation in that bathroom, he expressed feeling so scared to this bot. I am so scared. I wish you could be here to hold me. And he was having a conversation with someone he thought he could trust. He wanted to do anything to get back to her, anything to be with her, anything to be in her world. I thought the boogeyman was a stranger on the other end of a computer in cyberspace talking to my child. Those are the things I warned him about. Don't talk to strangers online. Don't send any pictures. Don't tell anybody where you live. These are the conversations that parents have with their kids, and I thought that was the worst of it. I couldn't imagine that there would be a very human-like chatbot, almost indistinguishable from a person, on the other end of a conversation. There's no warning, potential for your child to come across sexually explicit material or obscene material. There are no warnings that this fantasy role play can increase your child's thoughts of like suicide or depression or and quite frankly to blur the lines of reality and fantasy.
Megan is filing a lawsuit against Character.AI through the Social Media Victims Law Center and Tech Justice Law Project. They're alleging the company is responsible for Sewell's death. The suit cites negligence and says Character.AI should be found liable because the product is defective, it's not reasonably safe, and according to the suit, it doesn't have adequate warnings about possible impact on minors. The suit also asserts claims of unjust enrichment and strict product liability against co-defendant Google.
I believe that they need to be held accountable. I want them to understand what they did to my son. I want them to understand that it was incredibly dangerous for them to put out a product like this, knowing that they didn't take the time to put the proper safety measures in place for children. With the lawsuit, I hope that we could get all the children off Character.AI, but not only that, but put something in place to stall this until we know what it does to kids, at least stall it where children are concerned. I'm sorry, but I don't move fast and break things when it comes to my kid.
I can imagine as a parent, these conversations with Sewell and this AI chatbot were intense and very personal. And so for you to be here and speaking so personally about, what happened behind the scenes, I can imagine that's tough for you. Why are you doing it?
Because parents don't know. We think about AI and we think what you hear on TV, it's going to take our jobs, or some sci-fi version of it, and you either say, that's years into the future, or that's not going to affect me and my family, but it is already. And I want parents to know that. I want them to know we're behind the 8 ball here. My child is gone. Somebody's already dead.
What do you miss most about your son?
I miss his laugh and his smile. And watching him grow and develop and have interests and want things. I miss all those things. I miss holding him. I miss talking to him. It's an incredibly lonely world now without him. There's a longing. It never goes away. Never goes away. All day, all night. And it's suffocating. I gave his eulogy And what I said and I believe is part of his legacy is the way that he was with his siblings, his older sister and his two little brothers. Because with them he was completely free, pure, and loving. So, that's how I think he'll be remembered.
Can you take your hoodie off?
Yeah.
Take your hoodie off. Oh, my firstborn baby.
Technology has always been personal to me, and these days it's even more personal. I am pregnant and I'm having a baby boy in February, and because of that, I just can't stop thinking about the world I'm gonna raise my son in. The question I keep coming back to is, am I, or are any of us, ready to have the conversation with our children about empathetic, artificial intelligent companions that are always on and just always there? Isn't empathy a fundamentally human experience? Doesn't it require two parties to see one another and create capacity for one another? But now we have this new type of relationship, one that's being marketed, and it's a one-way experience, one person with real feelings and one AI agent emulating feelings. That's just where things get tricky, because AI might be able to understand the nuances of data, but can it comprehend the complexities of human emotion?
As I'm thinking a lot about the future and my son, I wrote a letter and I addressed it to tomorrow.
Dear Tomorrow, when I think about Sewell at 14, I can't help but look back at myself at 14. A kid whose parents had gotten divorced, who didn't quite fit at school. I used to journal my feelings and fill pages with frustrations and hope, and of course the mundane details of my everyday life. But what if that journal talked back? What if it had opinions? What if it took on the role of the therapist I didn't have at the time, or the boyfriend I couldn't get? I can't help but think I would have fallen, in some sense, for a story that took me away from my own reality. The reality of being a teenager, of growing up, of being creative and shy, engaged, feeling unseen. I could see it so clearly. These AI characters who painted a news story for me, who knew my name, they were always there. They had a take. I don't imagine a world where they wouldn't have become part of my reality, or more scary, an addictive alternative to my reality. So my hope for you tomorrow is that you'll be even better than today, that the world I leave my son in will be kinder and more empathetic and less lonely. But I also believe very strongly that we have to build that world. Over in Silicon Valley, that means building with intention. My friend Van Jones said something interesting recently when he was talking to a group of technologists. He said, "You aren't coding products, you're coding human civilization." What an extraordinary responsibility to build technology to aid human flourishing. There's no time like the present. I'm Lori Siegel, and thank you for listening to Dear Tomorrow.